Now, how about auditory training? What exactly is auditory training? Auditory training is electronically distorted music, that's randomly distorted. And it's played, the treatment consists of 2 half-an-hour sessions for 10 days. Does this work, or is it just a bunch of frou-frou? Well, research has shown that in some people, auditory training helps with hearing complex speech sounds. It also helps with reducing sound sensitivity. In fact, one study showed that a placebo treatment of just mono stereo, headphones with mono, old-fashioned mono stereo music, had the same effect, had the same good effect. But I want to emphasize it was mono, not stereo. See, stereo puts 2 different signals into each ear. And that's going to confuse the brain that's got attention shifting problems. So maybe listening to old-fashioned mono or cutting a wire on one side of the stereo headphone might have some of the same effect. Now, why would kids be echolalic? I think these brain scans give some good insights. You see, when you hear a word and when you see a word, different parts of the brain light up. Auditory cortex lights up when you hear a word. Visual cortex works hard when you're seeing a word. And when you think about a word, the frontal cortex lights up. So when the child repeats back the thing that's just been said, he's using another set of brain circuits. This may help him to understand it better. And the mistake a lot of people make is to stomp out echolalia. Well, if my kid's echolalic, you ought to be really happy, because it means that his brain is processing language. And one thing that scientists know is that the brain has got to process language, grammatically correct language, by age 7. Otherwise, the language acquisition circuits get erased from the brain. Well, if a child can sing an entire Barney video, then he's processing grammatically correct language. Now, he may not know what it all means. In fact, some autistic kids think the tone is the speech rather than the actual words. But at least, real grammar is going through the brain, and that's all the brain circuits need in order to get programmed. Then he has to learn that those words actually have meaning. Now, my mother taught me how to read with phonics. In fact, she got a book about Clara Barton, and she taught me how to sound out my words. I was a phonics learner. I was not echolalic. Now, the kids that are echolalic, they're going to be the whole word learners. As I said before, some people with autism are phonics learners. They're going to learn reading by sounding out their words. Now, the kids that are echolalic tend to be whole word learners. These are the ones that are going to learn with the flashcards. And some parents have found that the closed captions on the TV are really useful. Now, autistic kids should not be watching TV for 6 hours a day because it's just a big tune-in. An hour a day is fine. Kids need to have some downtime. My day was highly structured, but I did have an hour after lunch where I could just revert back to autism. And I can remember doing it. It was sort of like getting high on drugs. I would just sit there and do something like dribble sand through my fingers and just completely get out of it. And that was very common. And it's okay to do that a little bit to calm down. But 6 hours of TV or 6 hours playing the same little piece of a tape over and over again is not a good thing. Some things just felt like sandpaper to me in my clothes. And I put this picture up here just to give people an idea of what sandpaper would be like. Scratchy petticoats were like sandpaper in my underwear. How could you concentrate in school if you filled your underwear up with sandpaper? You just wouldn't be able to stand it. But that's the way a lot of clothes felt to me. And there's going to need to be some adjustments made for clothing with autistic children. They need to wear soft things against their skin. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to just wear nothing but sweatpants and t-shirts. You can get things that are better than that. But clothes are going to have to be washed and soft. Another thing is labels in the clothes bother me. I have to cut all the labels out, even now. And another problem I had is switching from one type of clothing to another, like switching from pants to a dress. It takes me up to 2 weeks to habituate to the new kind of clothing. So I just wear pants all the time. Now, my mother used to say to me, well, you can't be cold, with a skirt in the wintertime because you wore your shorts halfway into winter. Well, I wore my shorts halfway into winter because I couldn't stand the feeling of putting on the long pants. You may habituate in just, a few minutes. It takes me, quite a few days to habituate. A lot of autistic children will seek pressure. They'll do things like get under mattresses, get under sofa cushions, because pressure helps calm the nervous system down. And when I got into puberty, I started having horrible anxiety attacks. It was as if a lion was going to attack me, but there was no lion. When those hormones hit, the anxiety attacks hit. One of the things I did is I built this machine that I could get into that applies pressure to my body, because it helped to calm me down. And the way I have this rigged up, I can operate this on myself. You see, autistic kids also tend to be what's called tactfully defensive. They want to feel a good feeling of being hugged, but it's just too overwhelming, so they'll pull away. And you have to be gently insistent on working on desensitizing tactile defensiveness. Massage works, rubbing with towels works, deep pressure works, and a stimulus that a child may initially avoid, after he gets used to it, he then may seek it. When I was a little kid, I hated messy finger paints. I just couldn't stand putting my hands into that stuff. And when I first built this machine, at first I would tend to pull away from it. But after a while, I got my nervous system desensitized. Now that's not a very flattering rear view picture. I don't think we'll leave that up there very long. Now I even made a little squeeze machine for a piglet. And a piglet had the same response to it. They would just sort of snuggle down and go to sleep in there. Especially if I had little piglet friends there with him. Now if he was alone, he'd get very excited. But if I had little piglet friends, then he'd be quiet. Now here's a therapist, an occupational therapist, working with an autistic child using pressure. Now notice that she is interacting with the child. You can work on speech while you're doing something like this. When you're doing an activity like this, it can help calm the nervous system down and help get information through. You can get a little temporary time where the radio station's no longer jammed. I don't know if any of you have the old-fashioned TV with the rabbit ears, but you know, if you hold on to the rabbit ears, it would make the image good. But as soon as you let go of the rabbit ears, the image on the TV and the sound then got terrible again. There's something about people holding the rabbit ears that makes a really good antenna. But as soon as you let go, it's horrible. And doing this is sort of like holding on to the rabbit ears. It gives you a little window of opportunity to get through to the child. A little bit of time where the radio station is not jammed. Try doing speech therapy right while you're doing this. Try doing some of your applied behavior training right while you're doing this. Now, in order for sensory therapy to be helpful, you need to do it at least twice a day. Once a week's not enough. If you have an OT at school, get her to show you what she's doing so you can do the things at home. Now here's another therapist working with a child in a big inner tube. You know, you don't have to have really expensive equipment to do this with little kids. The squeezing machine is something that's mainly of value for adults because you can't get enough pressure with mattresses and beanbag chairs in adults. Here's a therapist working with a net swing. Sometimes a child will start to talk right while you're swinging, and it's slow swinging, 10 or 12 cycles a minute, very slow swinging. Now there's one little word of warning: never force swinging. If they hate it, don't do it. Now touch sensitivity, you've got to be gently insistent to get a child over touch sensitivity. But swinging, if they don't like it, don't do it. But there seems to be a certain kind of autistic kid that when you swing them, helps the brain to process better, and sometimes some speech will start to come out. If you work on speech therapy, work on applied behavior training right while you're swinging. This slide shows some research done by Lorna King in Phoenix, Arizona, and she found that while a child was swinging, more speech came out. Now this is not going to work with every autistic child. Autism is extremely variable. This is something that only works with a certain subtype, but it definitely does work with some children. Now, here's a teacher working with a child, and they put a little weighted vest on the child, because pressure's common, and you can make a little weighted vest. But in order to have the best effect, it's got to be 20 minutes on, and then take it off for half an hour. If you wear it all the time, you just habituate. It's 20 minutes on, take it off for half an hour or so, and then 20 minutes on again. They also made a little office cubicle to block out the extraneous stimulation. You'll also note that the child is sitting on a big rubber ball. Balancing on a ball can sometimes also help nervous system processing. Other good activities are games involving balancing. Things like walking on the edge of a 2x4 that's on the floor, of course. We don't want to do anything dangerous. But balancing games also sometimes can help get the speech circuits working. Another thing that helps is exercise. This slide shows a very, very severe lack of exercise. But there have now been 4 scientific studies that show that 2 45-minute periods of vigorous exercise, things like jogging or jumping on the trampoline or running around and shooting baskets or playing soccer, something that's very vigorous will help reduce tantrums, reduce stereotypies, and reduce hyperactivity. That's a simple thing that anybody can do, and this works in both children and adults. Another big problem I had is rhythm problems. I wasn't able to clap in time with the music. You know, I have to like watch somebody else's clapping. You know, my motor problems are not obvious, but they're there. I wanted so bad when I was in high school to get really good at skiing, and I could never get past the good intermediate stage. And I found out years later, when I had an MRI scan, that my cerebellum's 20% undersized, and I just don't balance. Because when I have to do the drone test walking a line, see, I just can't balance. I simply don't have enough cerebellar tissue in order to balance. Now, the thing that's really strange is there seems to be some autistic children that may have more cerebellum because they're super good at balancing. They'll do something like walk along the ridgepole of a roof. That's not me. I'm scared of heights. You know, again, I want to emphasize the variability of autism. Just want to end up with a few words about diagnosis. Autism is strictly a behavioral diagnosis. There's no brain scan that will give you a definitive diagnosis of autism. If a child under 3 years of age shows the typical autistic symptoms, then he's autistic. Now in the future, they may have brain scanning to do this, but they don't have it now.